Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of Macabre Matinee with Craig and Sean. I believe this is episode 24, if I can keep count.
I think you're
Uh,
right.
yeah, you get past 20 and it gets all a little bit harder from there. So,
It's so much more
as,
difficult.
as per usual, I am Craig Lance.
And I'm Sean, bearded Capolitan.
And this is the time in our episode when we give you our spoiler warning. We are going to be talking about Fear Street Part 2, 1978. If you have not seen this movie as of yet, you need to go ahead and pause this show and go watch the movie and then come back and listen to what we have to say about it, because we're going to drop some very, very good takes on this for you.
I
We
think
hope,
so.
anyways, that you like them.
It's the goal, at
Uh,
least.
so this was released just this year on Netflix. It's adapted from the R.L. Stein Fear Street books by Kyle Kylan, Phil Grisetti, I think is how you say his name, and Zach Olkiewicz. We'll go with that.
We are going with that.
This one is again directed by Lee Janik and sees Kiana Madeira returning as Dina and Benjamin Flores Jr. returning as Josh, with the addition of Sadie Sink as Ziggy, Brandon Spink as the young Will Good, and Macabre Sly as Tommy. There are, of course, many other people in this, but I'm not going to read the entire cast list to you. So, so this story pretty much picks up right where part one ended, with Dina and Josh are trying to get into C. Berman's home. If you remember, Miss Berman was the survivor of the Camp Nightwing slaughter, and they have taken the possessed Sam, Dina's girlfriend, over to Berman's house to try and get her help on how they can end this horrific endeavor they are on and save their lives, save their friends, and, save the world of, this, what is it, Shady Side? I get them backwards. It's like
Right.
Shady Side and Sunnyvale or something like that, right?
Believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Berman eventually capitulates to tell them her story, hoping that maybe they can come up with a way to end the curse on Shadyville and save Sam. And ultimately, all of them, because C. Berman's kind of living a crazy lifestyle where she's just kind of, zoomed in on her TV and waits for alarms to go off to tell her to do basic things in life like eat and so C. Berman sets out to tell them her story, which begins and really ends in 1978 with her and her sister at Camp Nightwing. Ziggy Berman is constantly getting into trouble, where her sister Cindy is a counselor at this camp, and Cindy really doesn't want to care or know or really just wants Ziggy to leave her the heck alone and let her live her life. But, sisters being what they are, it doesn't just happen that way. Because Ziggy is really just defending herself from a group of bullies. And, Cindy wants to just earn enough money to go to college and get out of Shady Side. So things, they kind of butt heads as sisters do. And, Ziggy is captured by the bullies and tied to a tree, and one of them burns her arm. She is eventually saved by the young Mr. Will Good, who later becomes the sheriff, if you remember from the first episode.
Right.
Yeah, so Ziggy goes to see the nurse, who happens to be Nurse Lane, which you might remember that name because she is the mother of Ruby Lane, the slasher killer from the last one that killed, what was it, 7 or 8 of her friends before killing herself. Um, so she goes to get treated for this burn and finds on her desk a book that has a bunch of information about the good witch, bad witch, Sarah Fear.
Right.
And she has taken a job at the camp because, as we soon find out, the camp is built where Sarah Fear was killed. Nurse Lane later attacks Tommy, Cindy's boyfriend, during the fight. He is concussed. Nurse Lane is eventually knocked out. The police show up and remove Nurse Lane, the only adult who was at the camp, and go ahead and leave the kids in charge of the asylum, because apparently that's what happens in Shadyville, or Shadyside.
Naturally.
The kids they have no parental or adult supervision at all with all these killings going on. So, as the camp prepares for the Color Wars, which is a competition between the Shadyside and the Sunnyvale campers, Tommy begins to hear voices, which is never a good sign in horror movies, in case you were wondering. That evening, Cindy, Tommy, and their friends Alice and Arnie go to investigate Nurse Lane's office to see what they can find, what was going on there. Really, all they find was some drugs and her notebook. And so, once reading the notes, they decide to go investigate Sarah Fear's. I guess it was intended to be her home, but they head out there to go investigate. What they find is a tunnel, and the tunnel takes them to a room below ground, which again I think is underneath where her home once stood. It's not real clear. Did you pick that up, Sean?
No, because they kind of talked about in the map how there's separate locations, the old residency is now changed. So,
right,
yeah. I mean, I'll be honest too. I watched this 3 weeks ago, but
yeah,
I didn't quite make a note of that. But I remember the map and talking about how they're on top of the homes back in 1666. So
it's kind of where the homes were, kind of where the city once stood. That of course it's moved on. All of those homes are gone.
Yeah.
So they go under this, and it used to be Sarah Fear's home, and they go under and they find names carved into the wall, and all of the names are past killers in this town. And at the very bottom is Tommy's name. And as they discover this, well, Tommy picks up an axe and decides to kill Arnie with it. Obviously, Tommy has lost his mind and has now been possessed by good old Sarah Fear.
Right.
Alice and Cindy escape into the tunnels, and there's kind of some sort of cave in, I guess, and they get stuck in the tunnel. So Tommy heads back to camp with axe in hand to take care of the rest of the Cindy and Alice study the notes that Nurse Lane left, and they discover that if they can return the severed hand to Sarah, to the remains of her body, they can end this curse. However, they have neither the hand nor the remains. So Tommy gets back to camp and starts killing the campers and counselors. Ziggy and Will, who have now hooked up romantically, are trying to get the kids and counselors together and protect them. The killings continue and eventually ends with Will taking an axe to his leg. One of the other counselors decides to load up all the kids into the bus and get the hell out of camp, leaving Will, Cindy, Alice, and Ziggy alone to deal with Tommy. In the meantime, Cindy has made it back to camp through the toilet, which doesn't quite work, and then she ends up finding another way in. But Cindy has made it back to camp, and her and Ziggy are on the run from Tommy. They ultimately stab and kill him, at which point with a broken leg finally emerges and makes it back to camp herself. Along the way, Alice has found the hand of Sarah. So as the three of them plan to take the hand of Sarah, this sounds like the right arm of Bruce Campbell. As they take the hand of Sarah to the hanging tree to return Sarah's hand to the remains, Tom uses to kill Alice. Ziggy and Cindy take off running with the hand, and they head to the hanging tree, hoping to find Sarah's remains. They are pursued there by the Shady Side killers, and they get to the tree and can't find the remains, of course, because we know they are not under that tree because we watched the first part.
Right.
So the killers show up and axe them both pretty good. They get them pretty well.
Oh, yes.
And the hand disappears into a hole dug near the tree where they were digging for the remains. And with their death, the killers leave. Will shows up and performs CPR on Ziggy, who is revived and saved. However, her sister Cindy doesn't make it. And you might be wondering, wait, I thought it was Seaberman that lived. Well, Ziggy's real name is Christine, and therefore the Seaberman. Dina and Josh, after hearing the story, go to the Shady Side Mall, which you might remember from the first part was where the Ghostface killer guy, what was his name? The mall killer?
Mall killer, that's all they called him, yeah.
Yeah, he showed where he started. Anyways, the hanging tree is still alive and well in the center of the mall.
Right.
So they dig up the hand of Sarah Fear, returning it to her remains in the woods. They bury the hand with the remains, and that's the end. Everything's all good. I don't even know what part 3 is going to be about.
Yeah, all good. Nothing wrong.
Yeah, as per typical, this movie ends on a cliffhanger, and yeah, so this one is obviously designed to be a trilogy. This is the second act in the trilogy, and that usually means a cliffhanger, and that is pretty much what happens here. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so to me, this is another good entry in the series. I didn't find it quite as good as the first one.
Agreed.
But with a lot of times in these trilogies, the second movie tends to be. I know everybody talks about Empire Strikes Back being the best of the series or whatever, but a lot of times the second act tends to be the one because it's setting so much up,
right,
that it doesn't have quite the traction on its own. So maybe as a whole, it may gain some more to it, but definitely, in my opinion, a little bit weaker than the first one. That's not to say this is bad at all.
No, not at all.
It takes a little while to get going. It doesn't have that like opening suspense scene or anything like that you have. I mean, it kind of does, but it's kind of a fake.
Right.
You think that there's a killer breaking into Ziggy's house, adult Ziggy's house. But it's just Dina and Josh trying to get her attention.
Right.
So it's kind of a fake out, which, I'm kind of a goof for that. I kind of like a killing thing at the beginning of my horror movies to kind of get me in the mood. But that's just me.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say about this film, and I agree with you, it's still very good, but it had the trouble of being not only the kind of fleshing out more of what's been going on, it also has the issue of being the origin film. Even though we also get that in part 3, but that's a whole different thing. We'll get into that next time. But with this one being a flashback, to a character we don't really have a lot of investment in yet.
Right.
I think also hindered it. And I'll say, early on, Ziggy, I mean, granted, you see she's getting bullied, she's getting picked on, but she's kind of a dick. It's earned. But early on, I was like, it's deserved. Don't get it wrong. We understand, and you will learn. And it got better as the movie went along for me. And I understand she was getting bullied, but there was, I think, just a lot of her anger early on. At first, I was like, damn, she's kind of a dick. You know what I mean? I'm not saying it's not justified, but I really wasn't rooting for her yet. It did come. Eventually, okay, yeah, I understand. We're learning more about her and her sister's relationship, and it improved my view of her. But early on, I was like, oh boy, this is a good start for me.
Yeah, you see, I kind of like Ziggy. I liked her from the beginning, but I understand wholeheartedly what you're saying.
Yeah.
She came across, and intentionally so, they made her edgy. and they
Right.
made her 1970s edgy. Kind of.
Right.
I mean, and it's intentional because of when this takes place. They made her that kind of um, everybody else, like her sister's real preppy, and she's kind of hippie-ish. There's just a kind of edge to her. She's definitely the one that's going to be, out behind the cabin smoking weed and kissing the boys, right?
Right.
Um,
And
so,
in this universe, so it's the camp counselors cleaning out the porta potties or the latrine or whatever while Jason drowns in the lake this time around.
yeah,
Because all the sex and drugs happens while they're cleaning up a bunch of red moss
right.
out the toilets, which I had to. And of course, this was a movie I had already heard a lot of people talking about as their favorite, which I totally get.
Yeah,
And maybe that's what it was. Also, I had a lot of hype because we're going to camp. We've been over Friday the 13th being my number one series. Jason Voorhees being my number one slasher monster. So, like I said, a lot of expectations, and again, I did not hate this film at all. I did like it a lot, but like it did, there were some issues, and it wasn't just me comparing it to the classic or anything. But like I said, again, Ziggy didn't really click with me right away. Uh, and that's really, and I can't remember her name. She had the short blonde hair. Her sister
Alice.
friend Alice. Thank you. Which I should
Yeah,
remember because I have a note specifically about her in a sec. But like, not the best actress. Like, or I just wasn't feeling at least the way that maybe they wanted her character to be. Like, again, got better later, but I don't know. Some of her performance wasn't. I wasn't really feeling that. And those are like the most nitpicky of negatives I can think of for this film.
well, she was the edgier than Ziggy edgy girl, right?
The edgy
With
pothead who doesn't care, and she drifted away from her friend being
yeah,
preppy. I kind of get it, and there's nothing wrong with tropes,
yeah,
especially in a film that's just homaging the campground '80s trope films, which I dig. Like, I mean, I'm sure you caught it. Two of the characters we have Tommy and Alice from Friday the 13th, the two
that's
survivors,
right.
which I loved that, even though they didn't quite fare so well in this iteration. But the names were clearly, a tribute to the two people that
Well,
made it out.
the cool thing is that there was what was it, part four of Friday the 13th, where
Yep.
everybody thought Tommy was the killer,
Right, right.
and so you have Tommy actually become the killer in this one.
Yeah,
And it's pretty cool. There's where he gets his mask that
I
because you
dug it.
never see his face in the first one. I liked how they
Right.
gave him his mask because obviously he wasn't messed up. There was nothing like that going on. So, um, some crazy things. It was good. There, the caves being under the new camp, that was kind of interesting.
Right.
The way that I guess Sarah Fear, when she uh, cut off her hand, the blood created the caverns underneath. Actually, is the way they made it seem, because they created the witch's mark under the ground, which
Yeah.
eventually became where Sarah's, I guess, where her essence remains, soul, whatever you want to call it. It certainly is where she keeps the dead that keep returning. So,
Right, right. Which of course we get.
because
I was just gonna say
go ahead.
we get into that, and because I have at time of recording I have already. My wife would not wait because normally I like to watch these at least a week we're gonna record, but
Right.
my wife wasn't waiting. She's like, "We're watching part three soon, right?" Like, yeah. So I have. So at this point, without saying anything about it, yeah, I've seen part three, and we will be getting into that for you good people at another time. And again, I do want to reiterate, like by the end, and I think Ziggy's edginess that was maybe rubbing me wrong got and it didn't, like I said, it didn't ruin anything for me. It was just early on I was like, wow, this is going to be our lead, which is, I don't really kind of go for that type of character. But then when we really started getting the dynamic between her and her sister, I really felt for them and I really was rooting for them, and I started to care of them both as leads. I think they played off each other very well, and I think that's what was working. Because if it was just Ziggy being, the angry, understandably so, but the angry edgy girl, or if it was just supposed to be us caring about her preppy sister who wants to be perfect and do everything right, apart, I think it would have made a much weaker film. But those two halves made a perfect whole lead. And I think that may have been intentional. How they like you wouldn't have, for me at least, I wouldn't have rooted for either one solo, but together it made a very compelling, dual lead in this.
Yeah, I absolutely agree because, as you said, Ziggy was a little too edgy at the beginning. Cindy was so straight edge that,
Right.
um, Alice in the Friday the 13th movie, in the first one, she
Hmm.
was straight edge, but she wasn't annoyingly straight edge.
Right. Right.
She just wasn't going to partake in the stuff that
Yeah.
the other counselors were doing.
Yeah. And there.
And, because of Jason morals, of course, she lives. But this not being Jason, just being an homage to it, you kind of they're able to take and combine those two things, and then you find out their tragic backstory, their with their family being uh, a broken home,
Right.
and their mom being so broke that they have no money, and of course just being from shady side of
Yes. Yeah, just being from
past.
Shade Side alone is just horrible in this world. Enough for you to
Well,
be
it's cursed, right?
casualties.
So
Yeah, right,
yeah,
right,
anybody that lives there has to deal with this curse that eliminate the killers that show up every 15, 20 years. You have just this curse over the town that it's like people feel like they can't get out of it. So you take the small town lifestyle and kind of magnify it by a thousand with this curse that hangs over it. So,
right.
and of course, it's kind of got a little bit of it feel to it because it does revolve around the kids. But
Right.
the it feel is that it's like the adults, other than a couple of them, don't really remember show up every now and then. And they kind of like change the story, so like the narrative that gets out to the world, and then after a while, everybody buys that new narrative.
Right, right.
So yeah, Tommy just went nuts and killed everybody, even though you have eyewitnesses saying, no, that's not what happened. You know, in the first one, they blamed it on the two friends that died, uh, even though the other three kids are going, that's not what happened. It just is what it is in this town, and
Yeah. And you'll
um,
and without again, don't want to say in too much, but
right.
you see the origin of the prejudice in part three. And like I said, which
Oh, I believe that.
again, it ties it all. Again, we'll get to that next time. It's hard. This is why I don't normally watch ahead because I don't want to actually slip anything up. But yeah,
Yeah.
seeing how long, and with this going back into '78, because we saw the prejudice and like kind of like it got played off a bit more like that school rivalry at first in the original one, but then you did start seeing like, yeah, like the police aren't taking the Shady Siders, uh you know their accounts as serious as the Sunnydales and all that. And then you see it even back
Right.
here, it has been going, that there's this and encourage in like semi-child violence by the camps, making the rivalry between them with counselors that got way too into capture the flag,
Oh, yeah. Right.
which was hilarious in itself and very campy, and fun. But I will say this though too, like this again, this series is taking this R rating, and even without necessarily having to show all the graphicness, dude, the amount of kids that fucking got killed in this movie, I was like, wow, they're not shying away from that.
I
And
would say that the amount of graphic kills you see in this is which I didn't do a kill count on this,
right.
but it's very equivalent to a Friday the 13th movie.
Oh, I mean for what they showed, but even like the
Yeah.
off-camera killing of the young campers,
Oh, yeah.
that was like impactful. And again, this whole series so far, especially in this one, man, the impact from Tommy's axe was, you felt that
Yeah.
shit. That was so like the ASMR, the not just like the visual, but like the sound and the energy at which this dude, like whatever they did to make that shit work, it worked like a motherfucker. I like it was.
Yeah.
This is a
I,
brutal film, and if you don't like, well, granted you don't see him hacking the kids, you know what he is though. And like, yeah, if child killing is your limit in horror films, which I kind of get because that's not shown in a lot of horror films. Usually
yeah.
it's the adult counselors or the adults playing teenagers. This
I mean, hell,
may be
even
rough for
the
me.
Friday the 13th video game, all the kids lived.
Right. So it's like, yeah, you know. So just a fair warning, but like, although I will say, if you're listening to us and watching this type of movie, it's probably not an issue. But I would understand, and this one does not shy away from pointing out that, hey, you know what? A serial killer entering a kids' campground that's full of kids, he gonna catch some kids, and yeah, it definitely happened, and it was brutal and just like and good, just honestly, because like with this the mysteries always abound in this one because it is telling the story through three movies. But this one, like, there were plenty of killing in the first movie as well, but this truly embraced for me the slasher genre, and I think
Yes.
they did it very
But
well.
yeah, this is a true homage to the 80s slashers.
Yep.
It absolutely is, where the first one was a true homage to the 90s horror slashers.
Right.
Um, they're a different, they're the same genre, but there is a very much a difference between the 90s and the 80s
Oh,
when it
absolutely.
comes to that kind of horror movie. And, as they take place in those times, it's kind of great that they're doing that, right?
Right.
So, I think I'm going to ultimately be very sad that we're not getting a Ruby Lane movie because
Yeah.
I think that's one that I would want to watch.
Uh,
It seems like it
honestly,
probably has the psychological aspect of it.
right. I would honestly hope because, again, not saying too much, there's a
Yeah,
lot of these killers we don't get the origins to. So
yeah,
I'm hoping, even like I said, without giving that away a little bit, I'm
yeah.
hoping we'll get some spin-offs, maybe, as long as there isn't, as long as the writers have an interesting tale about why they are, because like I said,
Well, each one of these killers has their own book that R.L. Stein wrote.
oh,
So
okay,
you,
okay.
yeah, there's like 20 books in this series.
Oh, I knew there was a few. I didn't realize there was that many more. I knew there were some they weren't
Yeah.
covering. But okay, I got you. So,
So pretty much these killers all, from my understanding, now I haven't read them, so I may be wrong, and if I am wrong, let me know. But my understanding is that each of these killers kind of has their own story, so it would be real easy to take their stories now that we have the overarching thing, which again, as you alluded to, and which if you've seen it on Netflix, you know that part three is takes place in 1666 and is obvious of Sarah Fear based
yeah,
off just when it takes place.
right,
Um, so based on that, you could go, you could go and give us these stories for the different killers real easily, I think.
right,
Now, how would they hold up is not part of a trilogy? I don't know. I would think that they would because I mean, there's certainly a couple of them I would love to see. The other killer that's in this one that you don't really see much about him, it's my understanding he's a bit of an homage to Michael Myers.
yeah,
So,
yep. And again, yeah, that would be
um,
that's it. You get a few, and we still got the kid. With I think he's like a hockey stick or something. All we ever see is
yeah,
flashes of him beating someone to death in bed, and you get a glimpse of him at the end here, and
yeah,
it's which is really good. Now, Craig, I'm gonna go ahead and say, yeah, we are, and I apologize to the listeners. We are experiencing some audio issues today, but
okay,
this has been the best we can. So I kind of wanted let's go ahead and wrap this up. I hate to cut it short,
okay.
but
No, let's do that.
we're doing the best we can, y'all. I apologize. So,
Yeah,
uh, because
horror moment.
yeah, horror moment because we were talking about it. I gotta give it. I mean, there was some good stuff. Again, very violent movie, very suspenseful film, especially in the
Right.
catacombs. But, and again, coming from not really digging Ziggy or her sister Cindy, to caring about them at the end. That fucking finale of them being stabbed and hacked to
Yeah,
death hit me so fucking hard because like
yeah,
I was expecting a twist because again we knew her as Ziggy this entire time, and we were gonna find
right.
out she was somebody completely different or maybe took their identity. I thought they were gone. I mean because
Yeah,
it was brutal and violent and them reaching for each other that hit me, brother.
yeah,
That was phenomenally shot, acted, and done. Yeah,
yeah. And I agree. That was my moment as well. If
yeah,
I had to pick a backup, just so we had something different,
right.
it's when Tommy first picks up the axe and just takes out Arnie.
Oh yeah,
It was violent, it was disgusting, and it was a great moment in the movie because it's that instant heel turn that
right,
you don't really know is coming. You know it's coming, but you don't know it's coming.
right,
So
right. You knew something was up with him. Well, I know I wouldn't expect him just to become the guy that we saw just charging in with an axe in the first film.
mm.
So yeah,
So
yeah.
where did you rate this, Sean?
Again, I really liked it. I still don't think, as good as that ending was, I don't think it was as good as the first film, which we rated, I believe, a 4.5.
Yeah,
But
you
this,
gave it a 4.5, and I gave it a 4.
yeah, but I still rank this one a 4. This is still very
Okay,
good. Uh, Again, the leads grew on me, but
right.
it was a bit of a stop. But by the end, they had me. So, like I said, I don't want to give it a low. Like 3.5 isn't just enough. So this is definitely a solid 4.
Yeah, I gave it a 3.5, and it's a solid movie. If it had had something at the beginning of the movie
Right.
to draw me in before Tommy's heel turn, I probably would have been more involved. But there's almost no horror aspects up until once Tommy turns, and then it goes completely batshit crazy.
Yeah,
So,
just shitty kids being bullies.
yep, yep.
I feel
So,
you on that. I think that's fair. That's more than fair.
yeah. So that's all I got then.
Yeah, same. Again, middle of the road. One thing I will say, and I believe I've said it before, maybe on the first one, and like I said, I don't want to hold it against the movie. I did not hold it against the film, and she was technically in the beginning. But like I said, Dina is carrying her actress is carrying the series for me. She is such a good lead, and her not.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to hold it against the film, but there was a bit of a knock in my soul against the film for not having more of her. Because again, but don't get it wrong. Don't worry, there's still part 3.
There you go.
All right. Again, sorry for cutting it a little bit short, y'all. There's a lot we can talk about, but we'd love to talk to y'all in the comments or on the social medias about this. Just Discord has not been liking us these last couple days. I'd just rather get this out while we can. As always, thank y'all for tuning in, and we'll catch y'all next time.
Talk to you later.